Hi, everybody. Nick Blazier back here with another interview, this time with Benjamin Friesen. Do you ever go by Benjamin or just Ben?
I always envisioned that would be my professional name, but I always just go by Ben.
All right. Ben Friesen. Maybe there's a middle initial I could use in there or
Oh,
something.
well, let's use my full name, Benjamin Abraham Friesen. Presidential
Oh,
name if I've
okay.
ever heard one.
Ben A. Ben A. I got
Yeah.
it. For any of you that don't know him, he is a tournament director in the U.S. Also does a lot of work with the USBGF. I've got on the screen here information about his cherry blossom tournament that's coming up in April in the U.S. This is a question I get all the time overseas. It's like, what or what U.S. tournament should I go to if I was going to travel to the States? So you can make your pitch for that one or some other
Sure,
one. If you'd
sure.
like to tell people to go to some other one, that's fine too. But yeah, this is not the only tournament he runs either. And we've had a lot of like inspiring conversations about sort of future of streaming and things like this and where backgammon could go. So I thought it'd be fun to just get on and do an interview and talk about all that stuff, you know? So welcome, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's funny. The thing we just were talking about kind of before this interview, you
Yeah.
introduced me as a board member, as a director. I wear so many hats in the community, and it's
Yeah.
kind of hard because questions like, "Oh, do you want to promote your own tournament?" I'm like, "Well, I do, but I also don't want to slight all the other tournaments that that are on the tour." And so it's hard. It's hard, and I really try to be conscious of that, but yeah, Cherry Blossom is a great tournament. We had record numbers last year, and hope to do it again. I've got a great team, and that's really what it's becoming. I think on the tour is about the team you have and how they can handle the chaos that is a backgammon tournament. I mean, these tournaments are always chaotic no matter what you do, right?
Absolutely,
So
man.
definitely have
Yeah.
fun with it. But the next tournament coming up, I mean, if people see this in time, is New York, and New York is always a great tournament.
Yeah.
Actually, the only reason why my ABT attendance at Cherry Blossom last year was larger than New York last year was because of COVID, and so
Yeah.
I don't expect that to happen this year. I think that New York is going to be massive, and I hope to be there, and I hope to be there streaming. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where you and I talk the most, I think, about future kind of passions, and streaming is one of them. And it's funny because I'll freely admit that I've never not always been the biggest proponent of streaming. Like
Yeah.
as a director, when I put my director hat on and I think what's best for my tournament, I don't think streaming is a big deal because now I'm spending thousands of dollars to give content to people that aren't even at the tournament. Like, like it's crazy. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like it's really good marketing. Obviously, people see the tournament, they see that there's a big event going on at the tournament, and they think about going next year. So
Yeah.
is even though if the hotel, for example, were to squeeze me and make it so it was impossible to pay for streaming, then maybe it would be the first thing on the chopping block, but I don't really consider it to be on the chopping block. It's just a kind of a key part of a tournament these days,
Yeah.
and we have
Yeah.
a lot of fun with it. Especially when
Yeah.
we can bring you, for example, to
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope I can be there. And some of the
yeah,
info there looks sick.
absolutely,
We're figuring that
yeah,
out. Yeah. Yeah, there's
yeah.
so many interesting topics in there though. And I think like one big one. So we mentioned I like your perspective that it's like a marketing tool for the tournament, but it's like the value of it's unclear. And this is something that I've been like explained to people quite a few times. And I can tell you, someone like Arda that runs these like big international tournaments, if you want to be the biggest backgammon tournament in the world, like you kind of have to have this streaming for people to even know that this tournament exists, I think, right? So
Yeah.
there is that, but then there's also this question of like, but what is that worth? And like what can a tournament director actually pay to have that sort of marketing? So I don't know, like if you feel like it, like I don't know if you could share numbers on it or something, but I don't think people have any like perspective of the scale of like what a tournament's bringing in and what they're operating with or anything like that, you
Oh,
know? Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm a very candid person,
Yeah.
and much to the dismay of some other people in the community, where they're like, "Oh, you can't share that stuff," and
Yeah.
I just do. Like, I know the value that I can provide, and I know that I'm gonna be charging for it more and more every year. And if people aren't willing to pay it, then I won't have a tournament. I mean, that's on the table. It is. This is
Yeah.
still, while most directors don't operate as, strictly speaking, a business where we're trying to pay ourselves a legitimate salary, where we're trying to make profit in order to invest the next year. most directors don't do that, but we can't completely disregard it either. We can't just spend $5,000 throwing a party every year. Like, that's not fair to us either.
Yeah.
So, something like Cherry Blossom, our budget is in the $30,000 range for costs, and that looks like 5 to 10,000 for the hotel, meeting space, food and beverage. That's 10 to 15,000 for staff between travel and salaries. And then that's just all the other stuff. I mean, it adds up. It's amazing. Brochures, trophies, transcription and recording costs for like the BMAB, and candy on site, and bringing in all the equipment. I mean, that's one thing I'm really proud of, is along with the development of the OTS, which is the online tournament. What is the online tournament software? Also stands for many other things like online tournament series. Rich Munitz and his son Harrison, they developed this over the last like year and a half, and we've spent a lot of time and money on this, and it's really nice. What it allows me to do is present all the brackets on these displays. So if you haven't seen it,
okay.
Ohio, Florida, and Cherry Blossom, and hopefully also and Michigan, and hopefully Denver next year, these will all had these big 55, 65-inch screens that displayed the brackets. And while that has a cost, the funny thing is over time it'll pay for itself, because in the past we would have to print these brackets ahead of time. We would have to sit there and write in all the names, and then somebody has to stand there all day writing the names, right? That's all they do is write names. And so over time, this technology is going to help us kind of reduce costs. But in the meantime, I spent like $5-6 grand on everything needed for that. I mean, nice. It was a massive investment, by the way, that has to sit somewhere all year. It's like, it's not as easy as just throwing a tournament together, although it can be. I do encourage everybody, if you're interested in running a tournament, you don't have to go crazy with it. The biggest thing is that you have three or four people for a kind of 100-player tournament on staff that are there, that can help with registration, that can help with whatever, and that you're not afraid to ask for help. I think that's the biggest thing on the tour. When directors get themselves into bad spots, we have just absolutely like decades. We have millennia of experience, in this community, like between Patrick Gibson and Carol Joy Cole. And, those are the best two examples. And, me and Rory are young, but also have a lot of experience that too. So yeah. Anyway, getting back to the original question, I don't ever meander through topics.
That's good.
Streaming itself is bare minimum $3,000. That's not including like if I had to buy any major equipment for that. I think that a full scale streaming studio like what Tara and Bill take to a tournament, my guess is, and I've heard numbers from them, but it's somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 of equipment that they bring. Wow. I mean, obscene levels of equipment, and that's why their streams are the best in the world. I like to think that my streams are one of the few that can rival theirs, but Tara, I mean, what she does is just second to none. There's just no doubt about it, as humbling as that is. And so there's a reason she spends hundreds of hours. I suspect she spent thousands of hours on this, right? She's fine-tuned every piece of equipment, and she knows how, like, I mean, if you ever get a chance to see Tara streaming, the diagrams that she has, like, she knows where every wire is going to be, and it's just so impressive. I'm not wired that way, actually. I am getting better at pre-planning, but the level of pre-planning that she's capable of is just, it's why her streams are the best. I mean, no doubt about it. So it's expensive, and fortunately for the community, they're doing it as a passion project. And as long as the director is willing to throw them a bone, I actually don't know how big that bone is, but they seem to be kind of agreeable to go work a tournament as the streamers. From my perspective, I'm paying Andy Lindenberg. Damn, I always forget if there's an N in her name. I'm just gonna look now. But Andy is the wife of Paul Horton. Paul Horton being the son of Jeb Horton, another person who's a good experience, that everybody should know about. But there's no N, so Andy Lindenberg. So she is now my kind of technical person. I have shared a lot of my expertise. I've done a lot of the setup. She's able to to stream, and so I have to pay her to travel there. I have to pay her to be there. And by the way, if you were to pay a staffing company, for example, an event staffing company for event help, you're talking about 100 an hour or 80 an hour, right? So when we're looking at these tournaments in a market like DC or like Florida, if I had to pay 3 other people to be there for the 12 hours a day, which is kind of the minimum that we end up needing, we're talking about like 50 hours times, let's say I get an insane deal and it's $50 an hour. I mean, we're talking about like 10 grand in staffing costs. And that's for people that are, professional event runners. And it's, so anyway, that it's expensive. I mean, getting back around to it, it's expensive. And we're seeing that. I did charge an $80 reg fee in Florida. It was the first time, and it won't be the last, unfortunately. And I did have some people say, hey, what's up with this? Why is it so much? And all I can do is say, it's just what it costs. These hotels are charging us big money. Next year in Florida, my hotel bill is going to be pushing $15,000 by itself. So it is what it is.
Man,
if we want to have the tournaments, we have to pay for it.
I've heard rumors. I hope none of this is like privileged information or something, but I think I was talking to Arda about the Gibraltar tournament, and I want to say their plan is to bring a staffing company on to help out with streaming, and I think the rate for that is $250 an hour. And I don't think
is that all?
I don't think that's outrageous at all for that kind of service. Everything you're describing, that like IT world consulting, like kind of gigs like this, which is what Tara is doing basically. It's not cheap, right? So we've gotten a long way on people volunteering those kinds of services. But we're really missing, like 8 different people have solved this one way or another, right? And I really look forward to like at some point, like taking the best of that and working as a team to sort of like learn from those lessons and actually get better, instead of like, well, we don't want to pay the 50 grand for Bill and Tar to do it, so let's try to find a cheap way to do it on our own. And then someone else is like, then they decide that was too hard, right? And then someone else comes in and does the same thing. I think we keep kind of cannibalizing that work that way,
We do, and even our community kind of we're naturally competitive, right? And so people are always judging every new stream against the previous one, and it can be demoralizing. I mean, actually, I think the biggest thing that the community can do if you really enjoy streaming is to be very thankful and very mindful about how you present your feedback, because most of the people in the community that are doing this stuff, they're doing it for pennies on the dollar, and the most damaging thing that can happen is somebody goes, your stream sucked. And I'm like, well, fine, I just won't do it again. Like that's the easy answer, right? So just telling people, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the effort. Here's some feedback. Like there's some glare in the corner of the board, or we can't really see the clock, or whatever. Providing that feedback in a constructive way allows us to improve. But just try to squeeze in the, hey, thanks again, because it really helps. It really helps motivate. And that's a big part of what our community and even the USBGF needs right now, is just to keep motivating the people that have the time and the energy to do this work, because it is hard. I mean, I was doing math on the number of hours I put in for the USBGF last year, and what that meant as a hourly rate. And it's like, I mean, basically I should be arrested for slave wages, like forcing myself to work for cheap.
Wait, doesn't the USBGF get arrested? I think there's someone else.
Trust me, I'm the one that made the choice, not them.
You're the employer as well.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny that we love backgammon, right? Everybody does. They're playing it, and we want to see it grow, and nobody's really sure how to do that. We do our best. We do the things that we think are going to help, like streaming. But there's always a lot of time and a lot of energy, a lot of money that's involved in it, and so the quickest way to ruin that energy is somebody saying, "Oh, I hate what you're doing," or "Oh, you suck," and then I'm just like, "Yeah, all right, I'll just go like to Vegas and drink and have a good time. Why am I putting my time and energy into this?" So that's anyway. I'll get off my soapbox now. So streaming.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think But like the topic that we've been talking about a lot too is it feels fairly apparent to us both with like those numbers that putting the burden of keeping streaming alive on a single tournament director just doesn't make sense for all these reasons. Like you run your cherry blossom and then there's like a bunch of different directors through the US and the world all trying to do the same thing that would then maybe have to try to figure out how to make providing streaming worth it for them where I think like the biggest potential for the value of it of streaming is engaging people that can't get there that are in the community already, of course, but growing the game, right? Like we're talking about
Yeah,
trying to let people know that like backgammon tournaments are happening around and that it's a mind sport and that you can think about it and that there's like all this prep and like work that goes into decisions and that these are like here are the characters playing at these tournaments that are like winning
yeah,
a lot, all these kinds of things. And so I think, you know, the I don't think there's a need for like the tournament circuit necessarily to consolidate, but the streaming service, in order to like leverage that somehow or find a way to get funding for it, I've been feeling like the streaming itself needs to provide the like I guess income and means to keep happening outside of the directors funding it. And I mean the directors should chip in. They get something out of it, right?
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
still it's clear that like that's a drop in the bucket from what if we really wanted like a lot of people like to come out and talk about like why can't this big be a big like ESPN production or like sell it to
yeah,
Netflix? All these things are like I don't know what to ballpark like $100,000 investment at least to like make something like this, right? And it's crystal clear that that's not coming from the tournament community, from the tournament director community, right? Like that's just
yeah.
not there. So yeah, it's been really alive in my mind about like, well, where do we even start turning this into a thing on its own that can generate its own interest in revenue and sponsorship or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
that's where I think it's one of those kind of business models where it has to be uh, almost like a self fulfilling prophecy. You have to have whether it's a group of people that we were to get together or a company like
yeah,
maybe there's a cannabis company that wants a new marketing opportunity, something that nobody else is doing.
yeah,
And if we could put together a professional model, a stream that we can take to different directors. I mean, as a director, I'm right now paying at least 3,000 to do this. I would happily take a discount and pay 1,000 or 1,500, and let somebody else do it.
yeah,
So if some business model could come in and start doing interviews and do human interest stories and reach out to all the news agencies that are in the area saying, hey, by the way, we're having a tournament next week and here's a promo video for it. Can you run this? Because like the community always loves it. The newspapers, the news agencies, the nightly news, whatever, they love this kind of stuff, but they didn't even know we exist. And
yeah,
and they also maybe can't invest their resources to make the video. So if we can act like we are a big deal, they will treat us like a big deal. I mean,
right.
it's like I said, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Unfortunately, even though you and I have these ideas, I know personally I have so much on my plate right now that it blows my mind to try to think about taking on this as a new project
Yeah,
unless I give all that up, which is an option. I mean,
yeah,
I look around at what I'm doing for backgammon, and this certainly looks like it might have the best impact long term. And so
mm,
it's on my mind to kind of shift gears, get away from some of the other work I'm doing, and focus on this for a while. But also, like I go back to this kind of encouragement thing, and I think back to all the people that have been rude and negative and, oh, your stream sucks and I've never seen a good stream, and I'm like, why do I want to put myself in front of them again? Why do I want to do this to myself?
yeah,
So it is just really important. If you see this, you as in the audience, and you're really passionate about streaming, don't be afraid to reach out. And if you have ideas, like, I am always open to hearing new ideas.
yeah,
It's just a part of how we grow this.
yeah.
um
I think
and
part of it
there's
too is like having tournament directors with buy-in to this bigger vision, right? Which like I feel really inspired thinking about this again, talking to you about it because I know you're trying to get involved in more tournaments, and this could be like a circuit with that. And Arta's another person where I could be very involved with. Yeah, so but I feel like that's what it needs is like this through story through all of them, and not like all these individual tournaments something to like bring all this media that we're making together. But yeah, you can't, it feels like an exponentially larger challenge to instead have to go convince all of these individual tournament directors of this idea instead of just like
Yeah.
having a couple that are already half bought in. So that makes
Yeah.
like that's a big barrier that goes away for me. But yeah, we also talked about trying to take this on, like think about starting this company or this business or whatever it looks like on my own is just like, do I really want to do all that? Like I love doing, I
Right.
love like the ideas and like doing the commentary in my piece. I'm figuring out all this OBS stuff. Like I'm getting better at all these things, but it's pretty big to just dive in and go on my own. And I don't really have the resources financially to like start it. So I'm kind of like
Right.
a little stuck there too. It's just like I keep like I'm in a place where I just want to put the idea out there and talk to people like you. And I think we can figure something out with enough people that get like gung ho about this and just sort of like wait for it to take hold, and be ready to go when it shows up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, I'm back on my soapbox. That's exactly what backgammon needs. We just
Yeah.
need more people that do like are stepping up a little bit, even if it's just a few hours a month. Even
Mm-hmm.
if you can take an hour a month to write a newsletter about backgammon in your community,
Mm.
you should write anything that's backgammon related that gets the word out, because that's how we build the momentum. That we get as much content out as possible on
Yeah.
Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook. We get you know news stories. We get random like Facebook posts about this or that, and that's how we build momentum. And somebody somewhere is going to go, wow, streaming, that's interesting. I really like backgammon, and I have an extra $500,000 that I can just throw at this. And you and me, obviously, that's money that we could never imagine. But there are plenty of people in the world who have an extra $500,000 just lying around. Like, it's not all that uncommon. And so
Right.
if we catch the right one that just says, yeah, that sounds like fun, all of a sudden we could make a run at this. And it's all about just getting the idea in enough people's heads and getting it out there. So that's why yesterday when you like, hey, we should do an interview, I said, yeah, let's do it. And then of course my first thought is, okay, well, we have to do this and that. I said, no, let's do it tomorrow. Who cares like what it's going to be? We don't need to plan this. Like, we just need to get more content in the world. That way people know backgammon exists. And they're willing to play, it's like
Yeah.
Florida. I'm switching gears a little bit, but I'll
No, you're
stop
good.
quickly.
Yeah.
Florida has so many people playing backgammon every single day right now. It's why it's just massive boom of a market. We had 15 or 20% growth in the last ABT
Yeah.
because there's backgammon on Monday, there's backgammon on Tuesday, there's backgammon on Wednesday, there's backgammon on Thursday. I mean, every single day, every private club is playing backgammon once a month or once every couple of weeks. There's a sports bar where they play tournaments twice a week. It's amazing. So anyway, if you're in
Yeah.
Florida and you're not playing backgammon every week, and you want to be, ask around. It's there. Even in the villages. So Southeast Florida is one example, but even in the villages, they're running backgammon events all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting to me too. There's little pockets of this going on. Like I know Chicago has a tournament or a shoot like probably more nights than not, right? Like or the suburb area. And I met a guy in Madison recently. I was like, "Oh, I used to play. It's a fun game. I live in Evanston. I'd like to play." I was like, "I mean, you can definitely play more backgammon if you want. Just reach out to me."
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's not like getting out there all that well. I think a lot of the culture that's playing too is not like necessarily caught up with the ways to get out to more people these days or
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah.
that. So there's that. But there's little pockets of like real inspiration around that. I was always impressed too with like I don't want to call it a smaller city, but like like the Twin Cities is not like one of the biggest U.S. cities exactly, but they
Yeah.
have one of the biggest like local club scenes going on, and people are like really into it. And I've always wished that like as a community we could be better at like learning from those things. Like, well, how did they do that, and how do we do that in more spots?
Yeah.
It's possible. It's just yeah,
It is.
yeah,
It takes somebody driving it. I mean,
yeah,
that's always the key, is somebody who has a few hours a week that can
yeah,
commit to running a club. One thing that's nice that we're working on, and I don't want to share too much about this, but
Hmm.
the OTS, the same bracket system that we're using for the ABT,
Yeah.
the plan is to roll that out to the local club level at some point,
Oh, cool. Okay.
and that will allow a director to know a lot less than what the current barrier is. I mean, the current
Mm.
barrier for a director is you have to have some understanding of brackets. You
Hmm.
have to have some understanding of how payouts should work. And then you have to have some, understanding of the rules.
Yeah.
And you don't have one of those things, it usually works out. But when somebody goes to a local club and the director is winging it and giving all their friends the buys because they don't know better and they don't know the rules, and so they make stuff up. I mean, when this kind of thing happens, even at the ABT level, people stop going. I mean, and that's where we have to be trying to give these resources to at every level. I mean, that
Yeah.
is a big part of what we're working on at the USBGF is how can we develop these resources and not just support the ABT. I mean, you and I have talked about this, and
Yeah.
I'm comfortable talking about this openly because everybody in the organization agrees that our mission is not to support the ABT.
Mm.
But
Okay.
right now, 85% of our income is the ABT. Like, so it's like, I can't just, if I'm a business, right, and all my income is from the morning rush of people buying my bagels and my coffee, I can't just say, well, we're not opening until 11. Like that, it's just, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to focus our energy on how can we grow something that's not just dependent on this top level that a lot of people aren't interested in playing. I
Yeah.
mean, to go to an ABT, I talked about the director expenses, but if you look at the player expenses, if you don't live in that city, then you're talking about, let's call it $400 round trip plus your Uber ride to the airport or your parking, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you're going to pay $150 a night in the hotels because the hotels are not just squeezing me as a director, they're squeezing the players too on their rate. Let's call it 3 nights if it's a short tournament.
Yeah.
So now we're at 1,000, or better math, we're at 850, and now the entry fee is 350 minimum. So now we're at 1,200, and now our reg fee is another 50, 100. I mean, we're talking about $1,500 probably bare minimum with food and everything,
Mhm.
and only 10% of the players cash. Like only 10% of the people get any of that back. So I get it as a player. You can't always go to an ABT. You want to be able to play backgammon in a way that's accessible, not just
Yeah.
physically, but also financially.
Mhm.
And that's that's not the ABT. I as much as I love the ABT, I've been playing ABTs for 15 years. Right, I'm 32, and I went to my first one when I was like 17 or 18.
Oh, wow.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
I've
I
not
mean,
been around that long, like 7 years for me.
I mean, it's amazing, but it's not the whole backgammon world. The backgammon world's so much bigger. It's why Galaxy
Yeah.
is so impressive. Is they've been reaching a community that we just didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really incredible. Man, there's so many things I want to respond to there. But
I know.
with
I'm sorry.
Galaxy specifically, like it's been incredible to me over the last year. Like a lot of the UBC work that I've done is finally catching up with people, and I can't believe how many people are like throw that on while they're in the car and listen to it and
No
learn about
way.
backgammon this way. You wouldn't believe how many people have told me, like, yeah, I listen to it all the time and I just pick
It's like a
things up.
podcast.
Apparently, but it's
That's
not.
amazing.
Like, yeah, but it's like, yeah, that's really they're finding people that maybe wouldn't find it otherwise. And the closest encounter I've had with that, my own YouTube channel, is just like comments from people. Occasionally, it comes up in like they're watching a chess video and they're like, maybe you like this backgammon thing. And people will comment and be like, "What is a pip?" And be like, so, but like there can be interest in it, right? That community's there,
Yeah.
and it's just how do we tap into it for sure. And I think a lot of this streaming stuff could be a way. Oh, there was something more interesting with the ABT tour and all the expenses there too. Yeah, I feel like this. Maybe I encounter more in the U.S. this attitude of wanting to travel out to tournaments for the value, like the old gambler logic, right? It's like I'm going to
Yeah.
go win this, and this is positive equity, and that's why I'm traveling to play backgammon. It feels
Yeah.
like this is sort of the culture that came up around it in like the 70s, 80s, or something, way before I was playing. Where in some other more like successful international tournaments, like most of the people that are like consistently at the tournaments talk about it being like a nice time to go spend time with their friends in like cool places and things like this, right? And I mean, it's exciting if you win, but you're also maybe you're there to compete and to like see how well you can play and all these things. And I feel like there's a lot more life in the game when people like adopt that perspective to it. And I think there's still a lot of trying to serve this idea of like that it can be like this profitable endeavor. Like you should try to go make this like
Yeah.
a full-time gambling thing or something. I don't know. I feel like our game could take a leap in the right direction if that just idea sort of died for a while, you know?
It's funny. I thought I was going to start reducing entry fees at tournaments that I was running. I
Yeah.
was going to start dropping the fees and upping the rake as a percent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after Florida, where I couldn't even pay myself, I mean, we didn't break even by a long shot, which is okay. I mean, I knew what I was getting into, right? I'm not saying that. I'm not looking for people to send me money. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But when I looked ahead to Cherry Blossom, I said, okay, I have to increase all of I have to increase the registration fee. I have to add another event where I can make more money. And I just couldn't convince myself to instead drop the fees and up the registration, because I know there's still a big chunk of people that will go, oh, I can never make my money back.
Right.
And then I hear people talk about other sports, other hobbies, like Scrabble, for example. And the Scrabble tournaments that I've been to in Michigan, they're not the big nationals. There's not hundreds of people. There's 50 people.
Mhm.
But those 50 people come in, they get a hotel room, and they spend 100 or 120 bucks to enter. And like one person, maybe two, gets money back. I mean, all that money is spent to run the tournament, but they're there to enjoy Scrabble, to see their friends, to go out to dinner. And I agree with you. I mean, that's the future model. I think there's always going to be a place for these big prize pools, these big, tournaments where people are chasing the value. But the fact is, the hotels by themselves, not me as an organizer that wants to pay myself a reasonable wage, but the hotel, the Hilton, the Hyatt, they're going to first force us to make that unachievable, because every year they're increasing their fees, their meeting space fees, their food and beverage fees by 10-20%. And I don't feel like I can keep the status quo and pay them,
Yeah.
without maybe dropping staffing, and then the tournament's not as good.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what I spend probably, my guess is always that I spend 300 to 400 hours pre, during, and post tournament when I'm running something.
Mhm.
And so, if I paid myself $50 an hour, like that'd be the whole budget, right? $20,000 right there. It's not
Yeah.
what we're looking to do, but at the same time, I certainly have to pay my staff. Like that's one thing I'll tell people readily. Like, the first people who get paid are my staff. Anybody who's working for me. Now, sometimes they've agreed to work for less, right? I had like, hey, I need a minimum number because we're never breaking even. And they gave me a minimum number, and that was cool. Like, it allowed me to justify running the tournament. But anyway, I got back onto finances and all
That's
this.
good, man. Yeah, I think people need to know about that, Yeah.
The UBC stuff, it's funny, as a player, we've talked about this. I think it's interesting. I don't know if other people feel the same. I have no interest as a player. I mean, when we talked about UBC, I went, I don't know, why the hell do I care about UBC? and you had some really interesting things to say about that. I mean,
Yeah.
is it meant to be an equity thing? Absolutely not. Like, first of all, recording and transcribing all of the matches, we're talking about $20 a match. If you want to be fair with what it costs, the energy it takes, and what it costs to transcribe a match, we got to be paying $20 a match.
Mhm.
And so that right there goes your equity. It's gone, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now, as a player, I have to not only beat my opponent, I have to outplay them. Come on, I can't do that.
Right.
So it's not the same value proposition, but people really enjoy it, and it allows you to go challenge yourself to just play as good as you can. You are guaranteed a decent number of matches, and I think that's where a lot of the value comes from.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what else you said. You gave me you convinced me that UBC is important, and that we should be paying attention to it, and that we should be running more of them. And I don't remember the whole conversation.
I can think a lot of angles on that. One of them that actually is pretty alive with having met the Digigammon team out in Cyprus. Like that's exciting to me that maybe we could have more match recording and transcription with less effort and less like maybe it doesn't have to be $20 a match someday and stuff like that. But since very early in my like getting introduced to the backgammon scene and things like that, I always thought it would be amazing if you ran a tournament like your Cherry Blossom or Florida or whatever, and part of that tournament was that every match had every table had a camera and recording, and all the matches would be transcribed. And then we had all that data, and then you can give people their PRs or some sort of ranking. You can give them like an ELO rating with that if you want, just by the matches they played, and they can have access to these video files for learning or whatever it is, right? And it's like, to me, just all the data that comes out of that, like if you fed that into something like the ABT, now you have something that I'm pretty interested in. But as like a tournament circuit and just to get points for winning or something like that, I just don't feel engaged with the short-term results that way. Especially when we talk about like it seems like what it's trying to feed is the idea of people traveling to all the tournaments, which just isn't really, I don't know, for all the reasons you shared already. Like it's not that exciting of a proposition at the moment, you know?
Right,
And
right.
I think it'd be way more exciting for people if they had a reason to like every local person interested in backgammon could convince themselves to come out to the closer tournaments at least, right? And we just
Yeah.
have these giant ones that way. But yeah, I don't know. Like this, I think this would be a super cool thing. I think it would come at the risk of people, like everyone worries about people seeing their PRs and what that might mean. And I think there's just like a small attitude shift that maybe can accommodate that. But I'm curious. I don't know. Like, does that seem like that would be an exciting thing if we had at all tournaments to you, or do you think it would be like a problem? Or
I
I don't know. Yeah,
I'm pushing that envelope today. I
yeah,
mean, you saw in Florida, we had 30 cameras, 30 recording stations that we were ready to roll out. The
yeah,
the biggest limit was labor, like the expertise of how to set these up, how to get them going.
yeah,
And then the other one was I had this conversation with somebody where they said, "I don't want you to record my match." And I said, "I'm
yeah,
not asking." Like as the director, that's not an option. So how can I help you? Like, how can I help you feel comfortable with it? Right. And
yeah,
and we talked about how like basically they don't want their PR known and all other stuff like this. And I'm just like, I understand that. Um, and the problem is one of the biggest reasons somebody might not want their PR known is because they want to play in a division that doesn't match their skill level. And
yeah,
and I do think that kind of behavior has to be eliminated from backgammon. It's not a hustle anymore. That's not cool. Like
yeah,
I get it. Some people were brought up that way, and some people it's a cultural thing where that's what makes you successful is that you're able to out hustle someone else. But from my perspective, that has no place at my tournament. If I see that kind of behavior, I will very aggressively, to the point of maybe even being unfair, rule against you. Like, I mean, I am not interested in that kind of behavior. It's not
yeah,
how we grow the game. This needs to be a community where we trust each other, we can be open with each other, and that means PR wise, for example, people need to understand that if they're playing better than a 9 PR, they are most likely in the top half of the open division. I mean, many tournaments that number is closer to 7, but the fact is that at an event like Florida, we had a PR range in the open division from like 2.5 or whatever Michi plays, all the way up to 20. I mean, I think 18 was I had a known player who I even encouraged, maybe you want to play the advanced, which would still be better than their skill level. And they said, no, I'm here to play backgammon. I want to play against the best people. I understand that my skill level, that I'm not going to be in a tight competitive range of skill level, but I can still win. Now, to be fair, I'm not convinced an 18 PR can win an ABT tournament. At 18, they're making mistakes that are just so hard to get lucky to not cost you the match.
yeah,
But at 10 PR, you can absolutely win the tournament. I mean,
yeah,
anything in that range, you stop making like barren shot leaving mistakes that you didn't have to leave a shot.
yeah,
But there's a certain level of blunder where you just make so many of them that just not like you can't win the match
yeah,
unless it's a 1-pointer. But yeah, so that's what people partly don't understand. And what's fascinating to me is the behavioral side of this. The biggest driver or one of the big drivers for people doing things that don't align with their moral compass is that they're afraid that they're going to be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And this is something, it's like behavioral economics, that if you've never read Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow or Misbehaving or any of these like Richard Thaler, other behavioral economics type books, it's fascinating. If I give you, Nick, a cup, just a random mug, hell, I'll give you this Yeti mug, right? You have probably a little bit of reference of what kind of value this has. It has the DraftKings logo on it,
Oh, excellent.
And I said, this is yours, but I want to buy it from you. How much do I have to pay? You're going to come up with a number. Let's say you come up with $30. And I'm just going to make that number up because it's not going to matter. Now, if I have this mug and I say, Nick, I'm selling you this fine mug, do you know that number that you offer me, and the average across a large sample size, is always going to be lower than the number that you want to buy me to buy it from? And it's all about like, no, this is mine. I don't want to give this up for less than its value. Yeah. And then when it's not yours, you don't care. And people, they can't stand this idea of being taken advantage of. Golden balls. This is another amazing example.
Yeah.
This show in the UK where at the end there's a prisoner's dilemma. And people always say, oh, I would never steal. I would always split. I would always share the prize money with my opponent. And then they get there and they go, shit, what if, excuse my language, what if he steals? I don't want to be this sucker. I can't. No, he's going to steal from me. I can't do it. I have to steal. I mean, it's mind-blowing to the point where the best story, I'm getting goosebumps because this stuff is so interesting to me. The best story about that show is one time two people go to the end and one guy says, oh yeah, I'm gonna split for sure. Yeah, you can trust me. I'm trustworthy. Another guy goes, I'm gonna steal. And the first guy goes, what? Yeah, I'm gonna steal. You need to take split, otherwise we're not gonna get anything. But afterwards, after the show, I'm gonna give you half the money. And he goes, no, that we'll just split that. And he goes, no, I'm not gonna split. I'm gonna steal. And like he convinces the guy to take split so that he can steal and that he'll give him half the money. And the host is like, I can't. By the way, he doesn't have to give you the money. Like, he can tell you whatever he wants, but if he steals, you're at his mercy. Like, we're paying him. And at the end, the guy, I mean, this was like a 45-minute conversation. If you can watch this on YouTube where they talk about this. Finally the host says, guys, you have to make your decision. Like, we've been here long enough. And they both open their ball and they both pick split. I mean, it was a complete bluff. The guy just had to convince his opponent that he was absolutely stealing so that he could be sure that he wasn't going to be taken advantage of. And in fact, after the show, the guy who was convinced to take split, he admitted that he was always stealing. That the only reason he split is because the guy so thoroughly convinced him that his only option was to trust him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind-blowing. And so when I approach a backgammon match, right, they're having a conflict. A guy goes, this mother effer, he keeps picking up my dice early because blah, blah, blah. And he, now he thinks that I rolled a 6-3 and I really rolled a 6-2. Like, it's never an issue. It's never really an issue, right? It's one person. Not never. There are people who do this stuff intentionally, but it's one person who made a mistake, completely incidentally, legitimately thinks that their opponent rolled a 6-3.
Yeah.
And one person who rolled the dice, who was trying to make a decision and got interrupted by their opponent picking them up, and legitimately thinks they rolled a 6-2. Like, right. It's just how these things are. But both people are so upset because they think their opponent's trying to pull one on them.
Yeah.
And so this is where recording every match just resonates so strongly with me, because when I walk up to a match and I go, guys, it doesn't matter. I'll just look at the video.
Yeah.
Like, it's over. There doesn't have to be a conflict. They can shake each other's hand at the end and not have any doubts that the match was legit. Yeah. And that's the biggest piece. The problem is those cameras, they cost $150 a piece.
Yeah.
The stands are 50 plus.
Yeah.
The wire, the battery, a recording kit. If you catch me on a good day, I'll sell it to you for $300. And that's a good day, right? Realistically, it should be $350 or $400 for the amount of work that I do acquiring this stuff. I mean, the cameras are out of production, right? Mm-hmm. So for us to do that for a 150 player tournament, we need 80 setups. And that's assuming that we can leave everything on the table all day,
Mhm.
which isn't always realistic because those memory cards fill up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we have to, by the way, let's say every camera has an average of 4 matches on it, or let's say 3. We'll take the under. Now we're talking about dealing with 225 files that are all in the 5 to 10 gigabyte range.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a couple 100 hours of work to deal with these files
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sitting in front of a computer. So I absolutely am going to do this one day. I don't know if it's, the end of my life or in the near future, but I will record every match in a tournament because I think this is the right way to go about it for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But there's a barrier there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's expensive. Just like the screens, it's expensive. It's a logistics issue,
Mhm.
you know. Um,
The
and
digigammon
yeah,
solution is like probably more expensive up front, but maybe scales better. But are you familiar? They actually run software on. I remember hearing a while ago that it's a Windows tablet, but I think they were just running it on a Windows laptop. But the idea is that the camera records it, and while the camera is recording the match, the digigammon software is actually processing the video file, and at the end, it tries to turn that into a transcription. And if it needs input from like a move or two, it asks you for it, and then that's done. But what that means is you need the software running while it's recording, and you need it to be recording through a laptop, not through our traditional GoPro kind of setup, you know? So that would be, yeah, go ahead.
so
Yeah.
you're saying that it it has to alert you in real time that something went wrong?
When it's doing the transcription. When it's doing the transcription. So it doesn't alert you during the match. It will ask, like, was this an illegal move afterward or what happened if it just can't figure out what happened. But that's during processing of the video file that it creates on its own afterward. But still, I think what this does then, like, I mean, if you can envision a tournament room full of computers doing this, right, with like actual recording setups, and afterwards you can just be like, okay, here is the recording and the match file because that's done already, because you watched it, right? And now we don't have to like organize all this and have this giant step of like going through all these videos afterwards, and it could be better, you know? Like I think, and it takes out the whole step of like people manually having to transcribe and ask these questions too, which is pretty nice, you know?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna have to reach out to this team. I
Yeah.
have heard so many times, oh, we're this close to digital transcriptions, and
Yeah.
no one's ever, not obviously not no one ever, but for the
Yeah.
most part, we don't see a product come out.
Yeah.
And my vision for something like this has always been that it doesn't have to be perfect,
Right.
because as a transcriber today, you have to start from the beginning and put in every match, but
Yeah.
if or every move, I mean, but
Yeah.
if something like this could process the file and just ask me what happened in all of the not 100% confident spots, or maybe even
That's exactly what it
95%,
does. Exactly what it does.
so
Yeah.
but it sounds like they're creating a video file that it specifically needs. So that's
Yeah.
the part that I'm curious off to ask about, because
Yeah.
I have tons of video files that are
Yeah.
overhead, squared off pretty well, flat. And I mean, I think that this would be a really
Yeah.
valuable service. I mean,
So supposedly they can't take your recording and run it through their software. I think I'm not sure why that would be so different than like an actual camera input. But that was I asked them afterwards, like if we just sent you a bunch of video files. I think part of it, actually, I do know why now, because part of the software setup is that it has to calibrate to the board to make sure it understands like what the dice are and that it can see them and what the checkers are, and then you run the video through with that calibration. And what it does is it effectively takes like it it registers a sequence of positions that occurred and creates a
right.
transcription out of this. And so I think there's some implied logic to like what the dice rolls were, maybe that you might need like
Yeah,
clarification on or something. I don't know how it does that. If it can't see them, I think it will like make a guess or something like that. But there's occasions where it's ambiguous, right? Was it a
right,
3-1 or a double ones? I don't know. It was four
right.
pips. So yeah, but it's pretty good. Like I got to play on it. I played a DMP match on it against the creator, and it said I played a 0, so I was happy. with the service.
Definitely working then. I mean,
Right. I thought it was great.
No improvements needed.
But they were using it every round of the BMAB event. They used it for one of the matches out there, and people were
What a
really impressed with it.
technique.
Yeah.
What a marketing technique that is. Just tell the person you're trying to sell to they played a 0, and they will always they'll go do interviews about how great this product is. If those guys aren't doing that now, this is I'll take my royalty check later.
No, I think their big challenge too, though, is that they've sunk like hundreds of thousands of dollars of dev effort into it, and so they're trying to figure out now, like, well, how can we recoup any of this, and what is that amount? And they have some goal, I think, of like, I think they're talking to the creator, if he could raise like I don't know if it was like 100,000 euros or something like that, he would love to just make the software open source and freeware to everyone. And just like he just wants to try to like close off the project and get something for it and hand it out. And he doesn't want to be in the business of like licensing it and selling it to people or anything like this. But then what do we do, right? So I think some big tournament ideas like this could be a step in the right direction for him, right? But it would have to be a lot of them. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think that I definitely going to reach out to him because it's man. For me, it's not a small business transcription right now, and more people would do it if it was accessible. So right now you figure it's like $10 a match plus it's like $1 per point to transcribe it. And that's relying, by the way, on labor in countries where the cost of living is very low.
Yeah.
So if we can make it where it's only like half that cost, $10 per match in total, then I think a lot more people become interested. And it's all, I studied operations. I studied revenue management. It's just all about the supply and demand, balancing. And if we can make premium products out of something like this, where people are willing to pay the $20 a match, $30 a match, because they get speed or because they get, whatever analysis, I don't know. But then we need that lower end product where maybe it's not perfect and they have to go back through the match move by move and make sure everything lined up, but they get the basic transcript like that and it's just done, and they'll pay $10 for it for the quick, the quick sample. I keep 4K, not 4K, but high definition. I guess it's just 1080p videos for this reason. No, maybe it is. Maybe they are 4K. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But I keep these.
The by the way. But cool.
Yeah, well, just more pixels, and more pixels means more likely to get to interpret the what happened correctly, right?
Yeah.
Because so I keep these videos. So I don't know. Maybe I can convince them to pivot a little bit and try to use videos that have already been done. And maybe they are. I mean, actually, I know that Mate, as an example, has been asked for his backlog of videos and match files. And it was to test one of these softwares where he already has obviously all these video files or all these match files that have a perfect transcript. So video files that have a perfect match file to it. So if the software can come up with the same result, then it's kind of tested to be accurate.
I think, that feels true to me too. That if they could, I can't decide for certain if it just would take us time to adjust to the new hardware requirements of doing it the way that I understood it was designed, or if it would be better if they could just process video files instead of having to process live, I think probably the latter. But I don't know. It's hard to see it when you're inside of it and you're like, well, we already do stands and GoPros. We're not going to, that would be a huge undertaking to convince everyone that records matches that now they should do a laptop and a webcam. Everyone except for me, of course. I have a that's already how I record my matches. But yeah, I think, it's just really not clear to me if it's just like we need a new way of thinking or it just would be a smarter project for them to process video files, Yeah.
It's funny because the logistics mind in me, I'm like, I don't have enough power outlets to deal with this. But like, I went to the Vegas tournament either in April or the previous November. We're at the Golden Nugget.
Yeah.
And this has happened before, and it's always funny when it happens, but we walk by their other ballroom.
Yeah.
And we go, what the hell? And we look in, and there's a national competition for table soccer. I don't know what they call it. Like, it's foosball, but they call it something else. You know, the professional name.
Got it.
And we're like, that's a thing, you know. And if, meanwhile, we're up in the other ballroom playing backgammon, right? And everybody's like, that's a thing, you know. Like, this happened at Cherry Blossom too, where there was a pole dancing competition, and it just blew my mind. And of course, I then reflected on the fact that I've got 150 people in the same room to play backgammon, but that's, you know,
that better be in the brochure if it's not.
I know. I didn't know. They didn't tell me. I would have had 300 people. But so my point on this is they run power. Every table has to be perfectly balanced. Every table has to have power. You know, so like there are ways to do this stuff. If we had to buy laptops and, you know, other cameras, but it does add a huge startup cost. I mean, the cheapest Windows laptop and webcam and, you know, way to connect them has got to be $400 or $500. I mean, I don't think you can get much under that. So multiply that times 70, and we're talking about a lot of money.
You need to be able to process some videos real time and things like that too. So it can't be the cheapest one, you know. But yeah, that is the kind of thing where, again, like consolidated as a project with the intention of being able to travel that around all the tournaments is like a different story. Though still a large and down the road one, you know. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's funny. I think about WSOP, World Series of Poker, and you know they do travel a lot of this stuff around. Like they, not a lot, but there's like this WSOP lighted sign that, you know, usually is at every stop. And hell, maybe they just each buy their own. Poker is a lot bigger industry. There's a lot more revenue there for them. But it would be really cool if we could have, like, you know, the stream, like the streaming booth that could move between tournaments and you know, this kind of thing. It's just like right now we do have to make that shift from value to entertainment. I mean, that's really what, if everybody came to these tournaments with entertainment on their mind, then I could charge $200 a person and you could play whatever you wanted. You could be the Masters champion, because it wouldn't be about the prize pool. It would be about, I want to play a single elimination tournament, long matches against the best players in the world. And I could let everybody in, you know. But there is the other side of that too, where like people do come to some of these tournaments to see those players, right? And so if we do eliminate all the money, those players don't come sometimes, you know. So it's there's
I think you can do both.
Another side of that.
You could still have like I mean, like any sort of poker series or something like this, right? You can have like a main event that everyone's there for, and then like a series of events up to it or something, or, you know, like this is basically what a backgammon tournament looks like already. But like what a lot of them are missing is this like a Stavder component, which I like really inspires me. A tournament out in Istanbul where they had, I think, 700 players last year, and they're working on 1,000 for this coming year in April, like right after your cherry blossom here. And I think everyone got 3 lives in that. I think it's like a Swiss format. And they started with 9-point matches. And after the first day, it dropped to 7 because they were like, well, we can't finish it.
right, exactly.
But
it's
I don't know
a
why
good
they
problem
did
to
it
have.
backwards. But I mean, it could be 5 or 3-point matches. I don't care. If we have everyone's in one division, it's like hundreds of people. And who knows who the champ's going to be in a shorter match, you know? I think, and like the World Series of Poker has an element like this too, where it really could, it's not like super likely, but it could be anyone, you know? Maybe there's certain kinds of amateurish styles that make it further through. And I do wonder, I wondered that when we were talking about that with backgammon. Is there a difference between 20 PR players, and is there a kind of 20 PR player that maybe could win a main event versus another one that would be very unlikely to, you know? I don't know what that difference of like inefficiency in backgammon is that might, you know, there are opportunities for sure to raise volatility, or I doubt to exploit the field tendencies the same way you would in poker, but maybe in a way, you know, I don't know. I think there's something out there.
Yeah. No, I think there is too. We've got a need for the next generation of analysis, the next generation of a supercomputer that can just look at all these matches and find trends like that. You know, I think that's probably the next big thing in backgammon from an analysis side. XG obviously revolutionized what we were doing, but there's people who outperform their PR by miles.
Yeah.
Now, some of these people, like Ray Fogerland, he is probably in the best 10% of players that go to an ABT, right? He's very good. And I don't mean to discount that too much,
Yeah.
but he's not Michi or Mochi. He's not playing a 2.5. And
Yeah.
he acknowledges that.
Yeah.
And what he does, he puts you in these spots that are impossible. I mean, there was one in fact, this match is why he won St. Louis and I wasn't in the Final Four, is he was in a blitz type position, but he had 3 or 4 checkers back. And I'm doing this from memory, so I could get some of this wrong. I had half of an anchor and another checker up, and he's shooting at everything. But the match score is lopsided in a way where when he cubes me or recubes me, I'm like, I'm never supposed to pass here, but like this is a pass, but I'm never supposed to pass here.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I end up taking, it was a monster no double, but I was this close to passing, and he knows that. He knows how to squeeze in those spots. So his 5 PR, 4.5 PR, whatever he is, isn't the same as someone who's purely learning from XG and just always trying to make XGs moves.
Yeah.
Because that person plays against somebody like me who plays a ton of backgammon against XG, and I'm just not going to make those big blunders that Ray can force me to make.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it is really interesting. I think 20 is too far, but I think 10 PR. I think there are people that play a 10 PR that should be playing the open because the mistakes they're making are mistakes that actually help them more than they hurt them.
That's still
But
like, yeah, people talk about like, I've had this conversation with some other teachers, book writers, things like that. And I am far more interested at this point in my like whatever I'm doing, coaching, writing, things like that. Like I feel like if I had to try to bring my goal, like condense it into a line, it would be like I would love to get as many intermediate advanced level players as I can comfortable playing the open. And I think
yeah,
there's a lot of different things that go into that. And part of it's just like as a community encouraging people to like get into the division that's the fun one to play. You know what I mean? But it's not as like like this idea of it being really intangible and like you have to play a certain PR to get in there. I don't think that's how backgammon works or what's fun about our game or anything like that, right? But I think there's also like plenty that we can be teaching players so that they would feel comfortable and like they're not having something that's theirs like swindled out of them by jumping into this division, right? It's like
yeah,
it should be like what are the things you have to know to get in there and feel like you're not just donating, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to me. So that's kind of like my goal, but it makes me wonder. I don't know. What do you have like? What's the one thing you'd like to do in backgammon?
As a player, as a director, as a board member,
Any
I
of it.
mean,
My goal is as a coach. I guess that's where my focus is. As a player, I'd have to take away from that other goal, and I feel like the other goal is more important to me right now. You know?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing is like growing the streaming community and having it be big enough to support some people to exist in the backgammon space. You know,
yeah,
those are big ones for me. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting. I take that bigger picture. Like, what should backgammon's biggest goal be right now? And we think it's growth. We think it's just exposing more people.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's right, but I wouldn't blame somebody for questioning that. Maybe we should be focusing more on the celebrities in backgammon. Maybe that's where growth will come from, is if we create these monsters that are playing 2.5 PR and competing at the top level, and we pay them to do it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what if we created a prize pool every year where the best PR players over the course of a week-long competition get paid, and that's their salary for the year? Like, their job was to study backgammon and be
Yeah.
better than everybody else.
Are
I
you
mean,
describing the UBC intentionally right now?
well, yes and no. I mean, the problem is there's no big financial backer on the UBC, but chess
Yeah.
chess is where my mind was.
But it
Some of the
wouldn't have to
best
be that big to
chess
get
players
that.
get this.
I've thought about that a lot, and I think it's in the tens of thousands range to create a fully sponsored field of 32, for example, and just be like, we're going to cover it. This is invite only. These are the best players. We'll figure out how we're going to determine who gets to come to this event.
Right.
But it's
Right.
like exactly what you're talking about, and we're going to crown a contender champion who's going to go on and play for the title. And it's not, yeah, it feels like there is a little bit of a disconnect in that competition right now that you have to like buy into it, you know? Um,
Well, and what's the incentive? I
yeah,
mean, we're never going to get an individual, not never, but it's going to be difficult to get an individual
mhm,
with no business interest, no marketing interest to just put up the money, right? We need to prove
yeah,
to somebody, a company, whatever, that we can make this big enough where they're going to get the exposure they need to
yeah,
justify the spend. And so maybe that is a company like Coca-Cola. I mean, they
sure,
sponsored chess in the last few years, maybe
yeah,
longer. It's I don't know all the details. I just know that they have done this.
yeah,
And maybe they say, okay, yeah, I want to be your primary sponsor, your stream sponsor, your everything
yeah.
at this UBC contender kind of tournament.
That's the easy
Um,
way. And I think
yeah,
like when viewership is in some place that those things become possible. I thought the first thing you came up with was cannabis. I thought you had a
yeah,
passion about this.
yeah. I really like this idea. There's a lot of
Of
money there right
cannabis?
now.
You love cannabis.
Yeah, well, I think our community, as much as we don't admit to it, like we do, we have a lot of cannabis users in our community, especially in the U.S. where it's
There
becoming
we go.
very, very
Yeah, yeah,
normal, and not taboo anymore.
yeah,
And so this could be a really good opportunity for a national brand. The problem, part of that is federally it's illegal still, so
mm,
there
yeah,
aren't really that many national brands. But people get excited about this. They want to grow this new budding industry. Budding, get it? And part of that would be marketing to weird places like
yeah.
backgammon. But I haven't. It's
That
funny. I've
could be,
talked about this
yeah.
with a couple people. I haven't reached out to these
That's an
companies.
awesome idea.
Maybe
Yeah,
they would just write a check. Like maybe it's
yeah.
a slam dunk, and I gotta reach out to them.
I still love the idea of like I feel like a step in the right direction would just be we've talked about this before too, but just smaller scale sponsorship. Maybe we find 32 sponsors to each somehow sponsor one individual player to go. And maybe that's a bunch of federations that send people. Or maybe
Yeah,
that's someone like Mochi that really thinks, hey, this kid in Japan can win it and I want him to go and I'm going to cover that, you know? It could look a lot of different ways, but we're not really like spreading the net to try to get where we want to be right now. It's like I feel like everyone is like, well, we don't have Coca-Cola, so I guess we just gotta do everything for free until
right,
then.
right, right.
So,
It's funny because what if we had a 32 player tournament
yeah,
and it was the traditional format
hmm,
that these players had to pay their own way, buy in,
yeah,
but then we work with people like federations to back these players, and the
yeah,
and the first place prize would pay for it. Like if
yeah,
if I could back,
yeah,
I don't know who it would be. Let's say it was Steve Sachs. He's one of the U.S. best kind of most consistent players, right?
yeah,
So let's say we decided we were going to send Steve Sachs to wherever, and if he wins the tournament, we get back half the money. Only first place, only the winner gets anything, and they get half the money back. $50,000.
yeah,
That's an interesting proposition.
yeah,
Where it's a great marketing opportunity. It's a
yeah,
great just story to tell, and there's some return.
yeah,
Ideally, we would want to have it be free. Like we
sure,
would not free. We would want to have it be set up so the players get
yeah.
kind of it's worth it for the players to go. It's a no brainer,
But
but
people like
we're
to
not
do
there yet.
these
But
things for like their federations too. What comes to mind with that is the World Team competition. I was
mhm.
so inspired by how like the Danish Backgammon Federation runs that. They sponsor their team to go to this tournament and play, and everything's covered, and the entry fee is covered by the federation. And if their team wins, then all the proceeds go to the federation. And it's all like, so they
Right,
get a trip out to the tournament to play the rest of it, and they're like representing their federation while they're there. But it's all very tightly woven, and I think individuals would probably be willing to do something like that too. If a federation sponsors them to
yeah,
go, sure, that can go back to the federation too if I win on that, or or it goes to them somehow. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways to make
yeah.
that interesting. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And the big thing is we need somebody driving it. I mean, so if
Hmm.
kind of speaking to the audience right now, if this resonates with you and
Yeah.
you have some time, like start working on it. People will always jump in. It's just like very few people are willing to commit that kind of first time commitment, you know, that first
Oh
big
yeah,
chunk of time.
yeah,
And so that's what we need is just more people doing small projects. I know I've said
yeah,
this 12 times already, but I will say it again.
yeah,
If you have a passion for anything in backgammon and you can give up an hour a week to do it because it will grow. Look at women in backgammon. You know, the
yeah,
thing that Karen Davis is working on. She said, you know what? There's other groups doing the same thing, but I think I want, this is where I want to spend my time
yeah.
and I want to spend my money. And now she's getting like weekly participants of on a Zoom call. They're doing tournaments all the time. I mean, I honestly don't even pay enough attention to it because I'm not a part of the kind of the target audience, but I do know that they're having a lot of success in getting the numbers
Yeah.
every week. And it just took a few hours a week, maybe an hour or two a week from Karen of focused time. And yeah, so
You and I aren't
that's
the target of a women in backgammon organization. You don't think? I mean,
I don't
I'm
know
very
how
interested in that.
I don't know how you identify, but I unfortunately do not identify as female.
Ah, but I identify as interested in females. So,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that well, I'm going to start the interested in women backgammon group. I don't think that's going to go well. I think that's counterintuitive. The
Oh,
safety net that we're
Gio
trying to
Harvey
provide.
is going to have a lot of good ideas for you.
Are we editing this?
No, absolutely not. All right, all right. Well, this has been great, Ben.
Love
I
it.
think
Yeah, absolutely.
I always feel fired up about a bunch of ideas. I hope we can run with like one of them at some
Right,
point. You know?
something
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
And I hope
Yeah,
someone out there sees this and has like ideas about how to get involved too. Like you said, man, that'd be cool.
absolutely. Or
Yeah,
a big checkbook. If you want to write a check, I'll run with whichever one of these ideas you want me to. Like I'm in.
absolutely. Well, thanks so much, dude. This has been great. I
Absolutely.
really
Thank
love
you.
having you on. If you wanna come talk more about ideas like this, I'm always down to do that again. You know, and otherwise, I'll see you. Let me know how the New York stuff goes. If there's gonna be streaming
Yeah,
there. Otherwise,
I
we're
know.
looking forward
Yeah.
to the cherry blossom in April for sure, man.
And actually, let me mention that too. Hopefully, people are still gonna be watching the video by here. But we need a sponsor for New York streaming.
Mm. Yeah. Okay.
It's the biggest tournament of the year usually, and right now it's just not in the budget. I was gonna go as a player. I'm not really interested in going as a player at this point for a variety of reasons. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's got nothing to do with the tournament itself. I mean,
Yeah.
Lynn runs a great tournament. She's always got great people on her staff, and it's always one of the biggest. And so, if you want to see a quality stream with in-person commentary, I need like $3,500 to make that happen. And it's not, it should, I could do it for less, but the reason I want 3,500 is I want to do things like interviews. I want to do little segments that are fun. I want to do it the right way. And so maybe you have a business or a brand that you want to promote and you would be the primary sponsor, the principal sponsor. And are you going to get enough views to justify 3,500 today? Like, you know, in January? No, but you will get views perpetually for the life of these videos. And so, especially if you have a brand that can benefit from that, like reach out to me. I hope we can make it happen. I'm working with some like the board manufacturers and stuff like that, trying to find a partner for this in 2023. But who knows? Maybe somebody will reach out, and then all of a sudden, you and I will be in New York.
Hell yeah, man. My
Yeah.
schedule's free if we can get there. So I'm on
Right.
that boat, too.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting thing trying to figure out. And like going to Cyprus, I felt so inspired by the tournaments. Like some people, like some UK Open folks, are reaching out for maybe. And there's like a lot of tournaments where the budget is there, and kind of like, okay, that's where my energy should be right now, instead of solving this in a month for New York.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
having
I
this
know.
giant business. But I'd love to. I really like. I reached out to Lynn, the director there too, and like mentioned it really is like one of the biggest tournaments in the states. You know, I'll be out at San
Yep.
Antonio. That's another great one that's running a UBC event too. Of course, as many year tournaments as I can get to. But yeah, there's this perpetual question overseas of like what is the U.S. tournament to go to, and that
Yep.
really could be an easy answer. You know, I mean, there's a few of
Yeah.
them that are solid answers there, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think for that to be like apparent to all these people, like it could use that step for sure. You know, so
Yeah.
I want it to be part of the
Absolutely.
circuit if it can. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it's funny that question's come up a couple times. I would always answer every tournament because
yeah,
every city has just amazing things to see, amazing things to do.
Yeah.
Some of the tournaments are smaller than others, but it's not like people are flying internationally to profit, right? So
Yeah.
if you want to come to the US and play a tournament, figure out which city you want to visit and go to that tournament. There's, I mean, almost every part of the world or every part of the country is represented.
Austin,
if you want the
Texas.
biggest tournaments, yeah, right. Austin. Well, if you like poker,
it's close to
then,
San Antonio. So.
Right, exactly. But like, yeah, and of course, everybody's got access to the results page. They can see what the biggest tournaments are. But every tournament on the tour is run by people who are passionate about backgammon. Everybody's going to try to give you value.
Yeah.
But it's So anyway, I know we could probably talk for hours and hours, and I hope to do this again soon. So
let me ask you before we wrap up too. What are all the US tournaments that you're like involved in running?
Yeah, so the tournaments that I basically own and operate now are Cherry Blossom and Florida. Karen Davis used to be the kind of owner, but she handed the reins to me. And then I co-direct Denver and Michigan. Last year, I also co-directed Ohio. I'm handing that one over to Joe owns it, so he's handing it over to Jonathan Hardigree from Atlanta. So excited to get somebody new involved in backgammon. And then after that, I'm always I've gone to every tournament last year basically, and I'm always looking for new places, but like I've talked about, it's actually, it's running a tournament's not an asset. Like owning a tournament's not an asset. It's a liability. So when people say, oh, I want to have a tournament here, I go, okay, well, go get a hotel contract. And when they see the hotel contract, they go, I don't need to have a tournament here. So, but I am just, putting it out there. I'm looking at something in the Northeast, trying to better represent that area of the country late in the year or kind of middle of the year, because right now we have New York and Cherry Blossom, so I think there's a space there around like the end of the year. And then also in the Northwest, there's legal issues where like the government around Oregon and Washington they've been very sticky about things like backgammon. But I do think that area of the country needs to be represented on the tour. And right now there's nothing. There hasn't been for a while. So these are two areas where I'm kind of interested in doing something new.
Cool.
It'll be years, I'm sure, because, it just takes so much. And I almost even need a backer. Like I need somebody to say, I will make sure you make, minimum wage at least, something like that. But yeah, that's the other two. And like I said, I would encourage people to go to any and every tournament they have time to go to and want to go to. They're all great.
So that's Virginia in April.
Yep.
The Novi Michigan tournament is July 4th weekend every year, I think.
Yep.
I heard you're doing Florida in the end of August this year. Is the plan?
Middle of August. Yes.
Of August. Okay.
It was October, but that one, the hotel contract was just so expensive that I had no choice. I had to move to their least demand month, basically.
Oh, yeah. August will be nice and warm. If you like it hot.
Yeah. It'll be hot, humid, and in the playing room, it will be a beautiful 75 degrees. Yeah.
And then Denver's like September, right?
It's actually Columbus Day now. So Denver and Florida switched.
When is Columbus Day? Isn't that Indigenous Peoples Day or something now, too? I thought we.
It might be actually. Just got your YouTube channel demonetized. No, it's like next year. It's like October 6th.
Oh, October.
It's the first weekend. Yeah, 5th, 6th, I think it is. And that's 2024. But that switch was it's the 7th, 8th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. That weekend was where Florida was. So now Denver will probably be there going forward. And then another interesting thing I want to throw out there is Vegas is potentially moving. I know Rory's probably going to be annoyed at me for sharing this, but it was supposed to be the end of November, 2 weeks, like a week after the Cyprus tournament.
Yeah.
There's also an F1 race that weekend in Vegas, the very first. So Rory, don't count if you're listening to this and you are booking your flights for next year in November, like don't count on it being in November. Wait for Rory to announce when his dates are going to be, because he wants to get off of that race. The room night, the rack rate in Vegas for that week is already $600 a night. Like it's obscene. So he wants to get off that weekend. That way people can actually afford to come to his tournament, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so if you're booking your flights for next year for that tournament, that's already weird.
It
Maybe
is,
don't
but
do
people,
that.
some people, they just get out there.
For Cyprus, you have to. The hotel books out, and they like sell out the
Yeah,
whole hotel like that year, but not quite
I'm
like
already
this
locked
year.
out. I was so annoyed that I didn't get back to him right away saying, yeah, I want my room next year. I'm sure somebody will cancel, but still.
Well, awesome. That's a whole
All
bunch of
right,
tournaments
cool.
where you can go meet Ben if you're in the States or outside of them. Come visit us. I'll try to be at a lot of those too. And again, thank you for the inspired conversations like always,
Yeah,
man. I hope we get to do more of these projects together someday,
absolutely.
man. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and
yeah.
definitely, I can't wait. Can't wait to see you out in the wild.
Awesome. Well, bye everybody. Thanks for tuning in if you made it this
Bye.
far.